Normally, when I'm done watching a movie, especially in the theaters, I'm able to come up with some kind of, cohesive thoughts, some able to form some general opinion about what I thought of the movie and just the flaws, what I loved about it, what I really disliked about it, just anything. And 12 Years a Slave is one of those films that I encounter very rarely where I just it left me literally speechless. Where when family members or friends would bring up, like, what did you think about 12 Years a Slave? I would just sit there and just shake my head and just be like, I don't know. I was so shaken by this film, something I haven't experienced in a long time, in a very, very long time. Probably since seeing something like Schindler's List, where I just felt so overwhelmed and emotionally drained and tired that I felt like I had just gone through a horrible experience. And watching this film was just simultaneously extraordinary and draining. And I've given it lots of thought, and I finally come to the conclusion that this is 12 Years a Slave is one of the best films I have ever seen in my life. Really, this is extraordinary. This is one of the biggest surprises I've had in a while as far as films are concerned. Let me talk about the plot. This is based on a very true story about a former slave named Solomon Northup, who in 1841, he was a free man. He was living in New York at the time, and he was an expert violin player. And one day, he is tricked by a pair of gentlemen who tell him, "Oh, we work for this traveling circus, and we want you to come play the violin for us." And the two men take him out. They pretty much drug him. And the next morning, Northup wakes up and finds himself a slave. He's chained to the floor pretty much. He is beaten within an inch of his life right from the get-go. And he is sold into slavery. And this is where he spends the next 12 years of his life a slave. Until 12 years later, he was finally freed and returned to his family, and he wrote a manuscript about it. And you got to imagine that this kind of material would have to be you'd have to really do some soul searching to find it within yourself to make a film like this and not only pay respect to this man, this extraordinary man who went through this horrible ordeal. You have to find it in yourself. You have to come up with a way to see how you can make this film and not have it feel like it's a tightrope thing where you have to walk a very fine line between showing this horrific event but not seeming exploitive. You have to have some kind of unique approach to this subject matter, but not without, and this is inevitable. This film will fan flames of hatred in some people, but that is not what 12 Years a Slave is trying to do. This film, and it was directed by Steve McQueen. If you do not, yeah, ha ha ha, we get it. Not that Steve McQueen. He's a black British director, and if you're not familiar with his films, he did this film called Hunger. It was his debut feature film. It's in the Criterion collection right now, and it was one of the first exposures of Michael Fassbender to the public as like a big leading man. And it's been a while since I've seen Hunger. I didn't really care for it the first time I saw it, but now I really want to see it again. And then his next film was Shame, again with Michael Fassbender, about a guy going through a very, very graphic sexual addiction and having to come to terms and deal with this problem head on with the arrival of his equally fucked up sister. And I thought that film was amazing. I loved Shame. It's not a film I can watch over and over again because of how disturbing it is, but that is a film everyone needs to see because it's one of the most gripping, devastating, and realistic portrays of not only sex addiction, but addiction in general. It really just blew me away. So that's why I was really looking forward to 12 Years a Slave. And this film as well blew me the hell away. And Steve McQueen, he deserves all kind of praise for this film. The writer, John Ridley, who is known for, I think he wrote Undercover Brother, and he was also wrote a part of, I think, Red Tails, which was stupid. And he's also, his next film is the Jimi Hendrix biopic that has been long in development. So I'm really looking forward to that for this film. These two men are able to create something and that it's a mixture of all these different kinds of. It's a very difficult task to do this, and they nail this shit. Where a lot of portrayals of slavery in the past have been, we've had a lot of slavery portrayals in the past, like Roots, very famous miniseries by Alex Haley. We've got North and South. It shows a lot of what slavery was like back then. We've also got films like Amistad and just other stuff. But I don't think, not even Roots or North and South, especially on television, unless it's something like HBO or Showtime, with these kinds of films, you're going to see very graphic physical violence. And you're going to see whipping, you're going to see lynching, you're going to see torture. But what I think this film does that the other films haven't even begun to show is how these slaves were just the mental cruelty involved with it, where these slaves, you cannot show this on television, especially on something like Roots or North and South, where these men and women and children were taken from their homes or born into this life, and they are considered livestock. They are not human beings in the eyes of in the eyes of most of these slave owners. They are cattle. They are put out nude to bathe and stripped of their humanity and dignity and beaten into the dirt like animals. And I have never seen a film show the humiliation involved with this time, and how these men and women and children were pretty much naked, put in a room like they were items and auctioned off to slave owners. And there's a scene where they're stripped naked and they're put in this room, and it's pretty much a live auction. They're in this fancy fucking house, and they're just shown nude, and literally at one point this guy goes, "Hey, this Negro over here, excuse my language, has fine breeding. Let me open his mouth there, look at that. He has fine gumption. He'll grow into a fine Negro worker someday." And it is one of the most disturbing things you will ever see. And it's just the beginning. If you think you have seen the worst in this film as far as it goes, if you cannot stomach the first hour of this film, you will not be able to get through the next hour and 17 minutes, I believe, because this film gets so graphic and fucked up with its portrayal. So Solomon Northup, really, he spends time. He's in the company of two slave owners. One is Benedict Cumberbatch, who plays a guy named William Ford, a plantation owner. And if you want to consider, he's like, I guess, a nice slave owner, but they do a great job of showing, making a point of saying, look, this slave owner may be nice, but he is still a slave owner. He does not give a fuck about you when it comes down to it. He only cares about himself, and they make a great job of showing that. And I think I won't be able to watch Sherlock for a while because I'll just be imagining Benedict Cumberbatch as a slave owner, and it was just, man, that was so just fucked up. And what's worse is that William Ford, Benedict Cumberbatch, is nice to Solomon Northup, but that makes it worse because that gives Solomon Northup hope where there is none. This is a hopeless fucking situation. And then, but I gotta say, Benedict Cumberbatch's character is a sweetheart compared to Michael Fassbender, who gives maybe the performance of his career in this film as this psychotic, it's just this evil. And if you've seen stuff like Roots and North and South, there's a character played by David Carradine in North and South who is just evil slave owner. That guy is a goddamn cuddly Care Bear compared to this man played by Michael Fassbender, who is psychotic. And he is known in the film, excuse my language, as a nigger breaker. He has a reputation for being especially cruel to his slaves. And it shows it where if you do not pick 200 pounds of cotton a day, you are beaten within an inch of your life, thrown into your hut, and forced to work again the very next day, the same conditions. And this is such a horrible, horrible film to sit through, where I'm surprised I was able to do it myself. And really, I am good. I can handle a lot of shit, where this film almost broke me, where I sat there and I had to look away at points because it was just so cruel and so horrible that it's just, man. And I rarely ever see a film that establishes its mood. It's such a grim atmosphere, so sad from the very first scene. There's a scene right at the beginning of the film, I think one of the first ones, where Solomon is sleeping, and one of the fellow slaves, who's a woman who has to share the hut with him, pretty much wakes him up, grabs his hand, and he lets her uses his hand to rub her breasts and to give herself pretty much finger herself, and it's such a really uncomfortable and sad moment. And it sets the mood for the whole film brilliantly. And I've gone on and on about how horrible this film is, how horrible it is to watch this film, and just how draining it is. And Steve McQueen knows this. And Steve McQueen wants you to look at this film. He wants you to experience it. And he does an amazing job so well that it's so... I cannot stress how draining and how horrible this film is to sit through. But if you can handle something like this is essential that you have to see this. This is an essential film. This is the most important film of the year, where I have never seen a film like this where I'm going to name 3 of the most brutal scenes are all done in almost one long shot. So you have to sit there with no cuts and watch these horrible portrayals of violence and cruelty happening. And it is painful, and it's stressful, and it's torture for the audience. Where when I saw it in theaters, I was with an audience that was really into it, but they were horrified. I kept looking around and seeing people just covering their eyes, shaking their heads, just their eyes... the people that were watching, their eyes were about to pop out of their head. And I'm not going to act like this is the most brutal, violent film imaginable. It's not. But for something like this, especially about slavery, not not just the enslavement of blacks in America in the 1800s. I'm talking about slavery in general. This is one of the most, probably the most raw and uncomfortable and disturbing portrayals of slavery I've ever seen. And oh my god, I've got it for 15 minutes. How fucked up this movie is. How is the rest of the film? From like, you know, acting. The acting in this film is phenomenal. It's top notch. And I hope I pronounced his name right. Chiwetel Ejiofor, who was the villain in Serenity. In case you don't know him anywhere else, he does an amazing job as Solomon Northup. He when he talks, it's like you can feel the despair and the desperation and the hopelessness in his voice, and his gut-wrenching. And when there's a moment of silence where he is just sitting there and like his eyes are piercing. I hope he gets an Oscar for this, because this is extraordinary. And also, before I talk about Michael Fassbender, he deserves special attention. Let me talk about people. Benedict Cumberbatch, he's great as the nice, quote unquote, nice slave owner. Paul Dano is this Weasley little shit overseer. He is a fucking despicable asshole, and you hate him for all the right reasons. And he does a great job. Brad Pitt is in it very briefly, but he does a great job. Paul Giamatti is in it very briefly, but you hate him as well. Sarah Paulson, who does an extraordinary job playing this despicable woman, who is the wife of Michael Fassbender's character. She's just despicable. I wanted to slap her repeatedly throughout this whole film. You got also a newcomer named Lupita. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Lupita Nyong'o. She plays Michael Fassbender's favorite slave, who he pretty much rapes and abuses her on a daily basis. And she is extraordinary. She has like dead, soulless eyes whenever she has to go through this thing. And the moments where she has to emote and show pain, I nearly was crying. It's just such a sad performance, and she killed it. My God, did she kill it? I cannot believe this is... I'm pretty sure this is one of her first acting roles. She was extraordinary. But I think the best performance in this film is Michael Fassbender, where he plays, like I said, the psychopath. And part of his character arc is that he immediately falls in love with one of his slaves, who named Patsy, who was played by Lupita Nyong'o. But she is just... he is despicable, and you hate him. And he does such a good job with this role. It must have killed Michael Fassbender having to play such a despicable person, but he does a damn good job. An amazing job. He needs to win the Oscar for this performance, because it is so powerful and evil. And I cannot believe I'm about to say this, but you see where he's coming from, why he abuses these slaves. He's just a mean drunk with so much insecurity about his own life, about the fact that he is in love with one of his slaves, madly in love with her, but he doesn't know how to express it, because he's married, number one, and his wife is constantly, metaphorically, cutting his nuts off. And the only way he can express his love is by beating this woman, this poor woman, senseless, where he doesn't know how to deal with the fact that he loves one of his slaves. And just watching this was... I keep bringing up the words torture and draining and disturbing, but I really have nothing else to say, really, because this is... It's extraordinary. And then let's talk about the visual setup. Steve McQueen, he has a very unique visual style. Lots of long takes, lots of close-ups. Very slow, meditative pacing that really heightens the devastatingly emotional moments. And if that doesn't change, a lot of people were worried that this was going to be a dramatic change in style for McQueen from Hunger and Shame. And I'm very happy to report he has not. In fact, his style has improved since those films. Lots of long takes that are extraordinary to look at. A lot of it has to do with the cinematography by Sean Bobbitt, who also did the extraordinary cinematography for another fantastic film this year, Place Beyond the Pines. And I think he also did the cinematography for Shame and Hunger, and he continues such a fantastic work here. It is gorgeous looking at this film, where a lot of films these days are using a digital kind of thing. I think this film was shot on film, actually, and is very grainy, and it gives the sense that you have been transported to this time period, and it is stunning to look at when you're not, covering your eyes, and it's so beautiful to look at. Even the acts of violence are staged with such power and brutality and I don't want to say beauty, but it's stunning. And you've also got and the dialogue in this film is incredible, where characters would just say stuff that would send chills down your spine, not only because of the way they said it, but because of the way it was written. John really delivers such an amazing script here. And also, I want to briefly touch upon what this film is going to do. This is not a film about white guilt. It's not. This film is not trying to fan the flames of hatred. This is a film that acknowledges that this horrible tragedy happened in American history. It's not something that we should forget. This is something we should remember, like the Holocaust, forever, for years and years and years to come, so that this shit does not happen ever again. But it's also saying that there's nothing really to forgive anymore. And this is a film that says, look, this happened. But white people have nothing to be ashamed about anymore. This happened almost 200 years ago, but it's part of a healing process that we acknowledge that this happened. But we do not blame white people anymore. And it's a very influential film. It's a very important film that people must see. And I think this is a necessary film among this day and age, especially after where our country right now, especially after stuff like the Trayvon Martin shooting, race relations right now, and it's not are at a very sensitive point. This is a film that is really trying to get to the bottom of why racial hatred exists, and it does it with such subtlety and class and sensitivity, and yet simultaneously with a power that I haven't seen in a film in years. And that's a starting point. Really, this film is not just about racial hatred, but about cruelty in general, especially how humanity can find it within themselves to be so cruel and demeaning to their fellow men. And this shit is still happening today. This is why we cannot forget this film. This is why when people simplify it as saying a film about white guilt and a hate film, that is not it at all. This is a film that we need to have because, look, there are still slaves out there today. Not only for race, but for gender, sexual orientation, political preferences, sex slavery. This is a film that is about all of that by focusing on something that happened within America's history. And America likes to talk about how, there's all these other atrocities in the world right now. We have had our own. And this is a film that acknowledges this and doesn't want us to forget it anytime soon. It's healing. If it's only through acknowledging what happened can we start to heal and start to heal up these wounds that have been in this country for almost 200 years. That's why I think this is an extraordinary film. And why it has such a gripping power. This film grabs you by the throat and refuses to let go until the very last second of the film. And now, here's where I'm going to nitpick, because this is not a perfect film. I'm going to nitpick some things. One thing I noticed, I have some flaws with it. I love Hans Zimmer, but I don't think his score is good, but there are some times where it doesn't feel right. Like, there's a point where he literally uses the almost laugh. If it wasn't such a horrible scene, I would have kind of like chuckled, where he uses the Inception, like the dun, dun, like he does in Inception. There's a point where he does that in here, and I thought it was kind of odd and out of place that such an electronica moment would be in a film about the slavery. It just seemed very out of place and just kind of inappropriate. And there's also a scene with with a woman who is a black slave who's the wife of one of the overseers, and she's played by Alfre Woodard, who, if you don't remember her, I believe this is I'm trying to remember where she's from. Damn. Okay, I'll look it up later. But if you can please point out to me where anything she's in, I'll be very thankful. There's a scene with her that establishes that yes, overseers and masters previously have fallen in love with slaves, but I thought it was a scene that didn't really need to be there, because we had already established that Michael Fassbender's character has fallen in love with one of his slaves, and I just didn't think that was the one scene I thought that kind of dragged a little bit. We really did not need to be there. And the last thing I'll say is that the final scene, and I'm not going to spoil what happens, but the final scene, I didn't think it tried to be a little emotionally manipulative, and I know all films are emotionally manipulative, but it tried to be a tearjerker. And that's the moment I didn't cry, only because, and I still felt what it was trying to get me to feel, but I didn't cry, because I was just so tired from this film, and so exhausted. And I gotta issue a warning out there. If you are very sensitive and have a weak stomach for violence and cruelty, and this is not a film you should see. This is really, unless you want to cover your eyes during almost half the film, this is not a film you should see, because it's very graphic, it's very disturbing, it's very fucked up, and just issuing it. And I know, Sean Combs, P. Diddy, he issued this statement where he put his support out for this film. He said that children should go see this film. Fuck that. No, children should not see this film. This will give them nightmares for the rest. This will fuck kids up. I don't think anyone, unless you are really ready to handle this, I don't think anyone under the age of, say, like 15 or 16 should watch this. Maybe this would be essential. This would be great viewing if it wasn't so graphic. This would be fantastic viewing for high school students or middle school students when they are learning about. And I know my high school showed Roots. This would be a great film to show instead of Roots, because number one, it's shorter. Number two, it's a lot more graphic and a lot more very vivid in its portrayal of the times. This is essential viewing for anyone, and I'm starting to come up with my own. I'm going to get to the final verdict. I've gone on and on and on about this film, and I'm trying to come up with some kind of rating system, and I think I'm going to go with stars. This film is the best film I've seen so far this year, and I'm not going to say I'll be shocked if I see anything different, because I still got Wolf of Wall Street and The Hobbit and The Wind Rises coming out soon, so I'm not going to say I'll be shocked if I see anything better this year. But this is, as of this moment, one of the best films of the decade. This is the most important film of this year, and maybe also the decade. This is a film that, if you can stomach this is a film that everybody needs to see. And if you are ready to handle it, please go out and support this film. Please go where, I don't care how far you have to drive. Realistically, please go see this film. Please once you see this film, please tell others to go see this film. And if you have those people in your family or your circle of friends that say, well, I don't want to see this because it looks like a white guilt film, and I don't want to see it because it's just a hate film, please try to talk them into going to see this film, because that is not this film's intention at all. And if I were to give it a rating right now, this gets my platinum star. This, really, it's very rare that I see films like these that I'm just left speechless, that I just can't put my thoughts into a coherent whole. And I cannot recommend this film enough. But this is one of those films that I have absolutely no desire to ever go see again. It's one of those films that's a masterpiece, it's extraordinary, but it's a one-time thing. And if I ever wanted to watch it again, I'd really have to take my time and really gather up the courage to watch it again. Because I had to gather up quite a bit of courage to see this film already. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please go out and support this film. And if you like what you see here, subscribe. And as always, have a good one.